Welcome to video number 7, where today we're going to talk about what property you get to keep in a bankruptcy. Now, this is a topic that often conjures an image of some court enforcer that's going to come and take away your property, or that, you might have to give up your firstborn child. But even though you might think that they're going to have you under a microscope and you're being examined, that's not how these cases work, and so it's really not something that you should be worried about. To help you kind of understand, what we need to talk about is exempt and non-exempt property. Now, one of the topics that's important when you're understanding exempt and non-exempt property are trustees, estates, and exemptions. Okay? All of your property, when you file a bankruptcy, all property that you own is collectively now owned or controlled by what's called the estate. Okay? This is a legal term for all of your property and your debts that belong to you. Okay? Think of it like an imaginary box that everything is going to get put into until the court can sort it all out. Now, a trustee is a lawyer who oversees that box or the estate, and he's going to manage it. And while a trustee doesn't directly represent all of the creditors in the case, it is his or her responsibility to ensure that all creditors are treated fairly according to the law. Now, exemptions are rules that determine what property is protected from the trustee or exempted from the estate at which things are able to be sold to help pay for creditors. Now, exemptions can either fall under federal rules or state rules. Most of the state laws that pertain to bankruptcy pretty much deal only with exceptions. There's a few exceptions to that rule, but exemptions are the majority of what state laws come into play with bankruptcy. On exemptions, a common example is the homestead exemption. This is probably something that most people encounter when they're looking at bankruptcy. It protects equity in your primary residence. Some states like Florida and Texas have unlimited homestead protection, whereas other states like Utah have certain limits. Utah only allows $20,000 per spouse of exempted equity to be claimed under the homestead exemption. States like Florida, that's why you see someone like O.J. Simpson go buy a house in Florida, because he knew, based on everything that was going on, he was going to end up in bankruptcy, and he knew that what the exemptions were there for the homestead. So that's how you can see these cases where some big celebrity has a $1 million home and they go into bankruptcy and they don't lose their house. It's because of the homestead exemption. Now, if you move to a new state, within 2 years of your bankruptcy filing, you might be required by the court to use the exemptions from the state where you lived just before that 2-year period. It's not a hard, fast rule, but it could come up. So that's something you want to talk to your lawyer about. Mention, hey, I lived in Colorado and I just moved here. Something to be aware of. Some states allow you to use either federal exemptions or state exemptions where you live, and then other states have completely opted out of the federal exemptions and require you to use state exemptions. And then in some states that have opted out, there's some special federal bankruptcy exemptions that still apply to things like retirement funds in pension plans and IRAs. That's a very common question people have is, oh, I'm afraid I'm going to lose my IRA, and that's not the case. They are, in fact, protected. Now, here's a quick tip. This question comes up all the time when we're talking about property and what you keep and what you don't. The value of property in a bankruptcy is determined by what it's worth right now as is. Okay, the method that we most commonly tell people to use is a garage sale or a fire sale value. Okay, if I put this out on the curb with a sign that said, come buy this best offer, what are you going to get? So when you're writing down the value of all your property, that's where you're going to derive those numbers from. Cars, on the other hand, are valued by looking up either the Kelley Blue Book trade-in value or obtaining a quote from a dealer for a trade-in.